I want to thank Pastor Scott and Jenny and this entire community. I have such dear friends in this room. And even those of you who I'm meeting for the very first time, this church family has come alongside of my family in prayer and in support and in hope for decades. Thank you so much for all that you've invested in us. When I was a sincere and certain atheist, well-meaning Christians kept giving me itty-bitty little Bibles. I had stacks and stacks of itty-bitty little Bibles, and every once in a while I would grab one of those itty-bitty little Bibles and I would open it up and I would try to read. And the words actually seemed thinner than the paper they were written upon. But when the God who pursues even those who deny him, when the God whose name is Jesus interrupted my atheistic existence, the very first thing that I wanted was a Bible. And when someone put one in my hands, it was no longer a book. This was a voice. Oh, and I wanted to hear the voice, and I wanted to study the voice. So I've been studying this voice from the very beginning. One of the themes that I've returned to many, many times over the years has been a study of worship. What is it? What does it look like? What does it mean? And each time I return to that study on worship, cover to cover in the scriptures, there is one passage that keeps captivating me. And so this morning I'm going to invite you to study that passage with me. Now, whenever we study ancient texts, we always ask questions of context. Who said what to whom, when, where, how, and if possible to discern why. And with regard to the scriptures, our next step is to identify a timeless biblical principle. And then we expend the energy to apply that biblical principle to our lives. Well, this morning, I'm going to rearrange that process ever so slightly. I'm going to first address the questions of context, save one. Then we're going to identify a timeless biblical principle. We're going to expend a good amount of energy wrapping our minds, wrapping our lives around that biblical principle. And then at the very end, we are going to take that timeless biblical principle, we're going to return to its original context and ask the final contextual question, the question of why. So I invite you this morning to join me in studying some of the less than heartwarming words of Jesus that perhaps we shouldn't be surprised Hallmark has not made a card out of. Matthew chapter 15. We'll begin in verse 7. Jesus says, "You hypocrites, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are about rules taught by men." Questions of context. Who said what to whom? Well, we have Jesus. He is speaking to two groups of religious leaders, Pharisees and teachers of the law. With regard to what, Jesus is quoting from Isaiah chapter 29, verse 13, spoken some 700 years earlier, where God inspired Isaiah to write these words, "These people come near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship of me is made up only of rules taught by men." When? I'd like you to think of this interaction as the center of a miracle and faith sandwich. Right before this, Jesus feeds the 5,000. He speaks to Peter about having little faith. Right after this, he speaks to the Canaanite woman about having great faith, and he feeds the 4,000. Where? We're at Gennesaret on the northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee. How? I think we can safely say the tone is confrontational. And we are going to save the last question of context, the question of why, for later. Again, our text, Matthew chapter 15, starting in verse 7, Jesus says, "You hypocrites, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are about rules taught by men. So evidently, the people in the Old Testament faced a challenge that the people in the New Testament also faced, that we face as well today. It's a timeless challenge, a timeless biblical principle. The need for us to distinguish between, to discern between, to tell the difference between forms and substance. Jesus said that the people of his day, they honored God with their forms. He said they honor God with their mouths. They said the right things at the right time. They did the right things in front of the right people. But the substance of faith, a heart that worships God in spirit and in truth, Jesus says that their heart was far away from the living God. And Jesus passed his hand over forms that lacked substance. He passed his hands over forms that lacked substance. And he said, vanity. Form without substance is vanity. Elsewhere, that word is translated fruitless, to no end, worthless. A timeless biblical principle, the need to distinguish between forms and substance. Allow me to layer some illustrations over this principle. Let's say that Pastor Scott was thirsty. And he came to me, he said, you know, Alicia, I'm kind of thirsty. And I said, Pastor Scott, I can take care of that. And so I went and I retrieved a form, a mug. There's no substance within it. It's just a form. And I go to him and I say, here you are, my brother. And he says, well, thanks, Alicia, but the form without any substance is useless to meet his real need. And I say, I get it. I understand. And I put down my form. I go back to the kitchen. I turn on the water. I cup my hands under some pure substance, no real transferable form with which to carry it, but I've got pure substance, and I say, here you are, my brother. So whereas the form without any substance was useless to meet his real need, the substance without any transferable form was unusable. You need both, don't you? They are dependent and yet distinct. Allow me to layer another illustration. I want you to consider the modern orange. Now, to my rather unagricultural eye, this orange has two parts. It's got the form. It's got the peel. And then within it's got the substance, the stuff I want to get to, the stuff that tastes good, the stuff that'll give me my daily dose of vitamin C. So, a question for you. Is the form necessary? Yes, it is. The form protects the substance. The form preserves the substance. The form prolongs the substance's life. But is the form the substance itself? No. No, they're dependent and yet distinct. Now, what if I were to become confused? And what if I were to start thinking that the form was the most important part? The form was what would nourish me. The form was what would strengthen me. That the form was the substance. I'm so convinced that the form is the substance itself that I'm going to eat it. And I'll take a bite. What do I taste? Bitter, yes. Because form without substance is just that. Form without substance is bitterness. Forms without substance is vanity. Oh, but how easy it is to confuse the two, isn't it? How easy it is to confuse singing for worship. How easy it is to confuse reading the Bible for obeying God's word. How easy it is to confuse coming to church with being the church. How easy it is to confuse experiencing God's presence for actually walking intimately with God as a person And how easy it is to see form and substance confusion in other cultures and in other generations, and miss seeing form and substance confusion in our own culture and in our own generation. To miss how we're perhaps dishonoring the forms that have served other generations well. To miss seeing how we're passing on our own favorite forms to the next generation as hand-me-downs, wondering why they're not as excited about it as they should be. A timeless biblical principle: we need to distinguish between forms and substance. Now, this biblical principle, it saturates the teachings of Jesus. We could spend a month of Sundays seeing Jesus emphasize this need in his teachings. But this morning, I want to draw our attention to 3 ways in which form and substance confusion causes complete chaos. Form and substance confusion causes complete chaos in our pursuit of unity, our pursuit of ministry, and by that I mean the service that overflows from our commitment to God, be it in the marketplace or in the church or in the community. And the chaos form and substance confusion causes in our pursuit of integrity. First, consider the chaos caused by form and substance confusion in our pursuit of unity. A long, long time ago, after I graduated from my undergraduate studies, I went overseas to serve as a missionary in the Far East. And when I was preparing to go, I knew that I wanted to present myself as a modest woman of God in that culture. And so modesty at that time in my culture meant those long, long granny dresses that went down to your toes. Now, I know that they've come back, but believe me, they weren't near as cute then as they are now. They went all the way down, they covered our toes, but I lived in South Texas. And so everything we had was sleeveless, and we gave ourselves a little bit of room around our neck to breathe. Would you believe I sewed myself my own wardrobe of granny dresses? And I wore my favorite blue one, hopped on the plane, got off the plane in Hong Kong. I was greeted by beautiful Chinese female ministers whose skirt line was above their knee, but who in that culture would have never bared their arms. And they would have never had a neckline below their collarbone. So we sat in the airport and we stared at each other. And we had some choices we could make, yes? We could have looked at one another and dismissed each other as a modest women deceived by vanity. Or we could have thought perhaps modesty in South Texas takes on a bit of a different form than it does in Hong Kong, which is what we did. We looked at one another and we laughed. And then we did the only appropriate thing you can do in such a circumstance. We went shopping to get me an appropriate wardrobe. And what was funny is when I came back home, I couldn't wear any of it. Friends, so much of what divides us has nothing to do with anything Jesus died for. There are some women in my life from a completely different culture, a completely different generation. They are mentors to me, and every year they grace me with time with them around their table. It wasn't that long ago, but we were eating dinner together, and they were sharing their grief, their pain over the music that had infiltrated the church that they were attending. And I listened with interest. They described how this type of music was incredibly contrary to the natural rhythm of life. Studies had even been done. And when this music played in the presence of farm animals, cows stopped giving milk. And when this music played in the presence of farm animals, chickens just up and died because it was so contrary to the rhythm of life. And I sat there thinking, what kind of crazy industrial noise has infiltrated their church? And then they started mentioning specific songs. And I realized what kind of noise that's infiltrated their church is my noise. Those are my songs. That's my worship. And as I sat there in silence, which without question was the wisest posture I could have assumed at that particular moment, I thought, this is an issue of form and substance. The forms that carried true worship for my sisters from a completely different generation and a completely different culture simply did not carry true worship for me, and vice versa. Some in the church, they prefer the hymnal, yes? And then there's some of us that we just like to sing off the wall. But really, what's the hymnal? It's a book. What's the projector? It's just a machine. They're both forms. And unless those forms are filled with the substance God longs for, hearts that worship him in spirit and in truth, Jesus is going to pass his hand over the hymnal and the projector equally, and he is going to say, vanity. Now, friends, I've used some lighthearted examples, but I think the weightier ones are painfully evident in our day. When it comes to our pursuit of unity, form and substance confusion creates short-sighted judgments and long-lasting divisions. Consider the chaos form and substance confusion causes in our pursuit of ministry, in our pursuit of service. I think all of us remember forms that used to be fruitful, yes? It was at our home, in our marketplace, at work, here in the church. There was a template. There was a means that used to seem to be fruitful, and now not so much. But our natural tendency is to keep dragging that form with us and to keep putting it in place and stepping back, waiting it to give birth to the substance that we remember and the substance that we treasure. But form isn't the creator of substance. Form is the caregiver of substance. Form isn't the source of substance. Form is the servant of substance. And without substance, even the fanciest of our forms are going to dry up pretty quickly. Well, evidently, the religious leaders of Jesus' day, they were rather fond of their forms. They loved counting them. They loved measuring them. They loved measuring other people by them. So with this timeless biblical principle now at the forefront of our minds and hearts, I would like us to return to a passage in Luke chapter 5, starting in verse 36, in which Jesus says, "No one tears a patch in a new garment and sews it onto an old one. If he does, he'll have torn the new garment. The patch from the new will not match the old, and no one pours new wine into old wineskins. If he does, the new wine will burst the skins, the wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, new wine must be poured into new wineskins. And no one drinking the old wine wants the new, because he says that the old wine is better." I think that the people of Jesus' day prayed prayers like we do. Oh God, would you do something new? Would you do something new among us? And I think the people of Jesus' day had an unspoken addendum like we do. And while you're doing something new, would you mind using our old forms? Because we just finished our flow chart and it looks great. And God was saying to them then and to us now, I am doing something new. Even now it springs up. Can you not perceive it? But the old forms, they may not be able to carry the new. The religious leaders in Jesus' day, they weren't willing to release what they could count in order to embrace what could set them free. Really, what a pity. What a pity in any generation for us to treasure the cup more than the life-giving water than it can hold. When it comes to our pursuit of ministry, form and substance confusion creates tired practices that are fought for, even after perhaps they become lifeless. And consider the chaos form and substance confusion causes in our pursuit of integrity. The harshest words of Jesus were not reserved for the lost. The harshest words of Jesus were reserved for hypocrites, for people who hoped that what people could see would somehow be a substitute for what only God can see. Consider Matthew chapter 23, starting in verse 23. Jesus says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give a tenth of your spices, but have you neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, faithfulness? You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. Woe to them, and woe to me. I tithe, and I will continue. But am I neglecting the more important matters of the law? Am I using my voice to seek justice for those who have no voice? Am I showing mercy to the broken in body and mind? Am I being faithful to my covenants and to the covenants of others? Jesus continues, verse 25. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they're full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisees, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside will also be clean. Woe to them, woe to me, woe to us. We may represent well. We may spend a whole lot of time and money making sure that what people see externally shines. But what is within us? There are no substitutes for substance. Within is their greed, is their self-indulgence, is their pride. Jesus continues in verse 27, woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You're like whitewashed tombs which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of dead men's bones and everything unclean. Woe to us. We may be the darling of the office. We may be the one that everybody looks to in the family. But God searches the interior spaces of us, and his eyes rest upon us and who we really are when no one else is looking. Within, are we caressing things that Jesus was crucified for? Are we caressing things that Jesus was crucified for? Within, are there things unclean? Within, are there dead things? Integrity has no doubles. Integrity has no stand-ins. When it comes to our pursuit of integrity, form and substance confusion creates an arrogant religion. It breeds a polished hypocrisy. A challenge in the Old Testament, a challenge in the New Testament, a challenge for us today, a timeless biblical principle. We must distinguish between forms and substance. So now let's take that timeless principle, let's reinsert it in its original context and ask the final context question, the question of why? What inspired Jesus to call down Isaiah 29 upon his listeners? What was the context in which this discussion occurs? We see the clues in Matthew 15, starting in verse 1. Then some Pharisees and teachers of the law came to Jesus from Jerusalem and asked, why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? They don't wash their hands before they eat. What prompted this entire discussion? The leaders were concerned about some dirty hands before dinner. Now, at first glance, we look at this and we say, really? I mean, come on. Form, how clear is this? How obvious is this? Clearly this is form. But it wasn't so clear to them. This tradition, the ceremonial washing of hands, was an ancient and sacred tradition. It had been passed on generation to generation. It was recorded in the Mishnah, and it was a matter of conscience. To transgress and break this tradition was seen as a sin against God. In my research, I came across a rabbi, Rabbi Joseph, and he said that to eat with unwashen hands was as great a sin as adultery. There was another rabbi, Rabbi Akiba, who was imprisoned. And every day he was given 2 glasses of water, one to drink because we need water to live, and another with which to wash his hands. There was some kind of accident. One of the glasses tipped over, spilled all of its contents on the ground. He had 1 remaining glass. What do you think he did with it? Did he drink it or did he wash his hands? Exactly. He's quoted as saying this, I would rather die than transgress the tradition of the elders. For them, friends, that form, that ceremonial washing of hands, that form had become substance to them. And no doubt their form and substance confusion created roadblocks in their pursuit of unity. No doubt their form and substance confusion made ineffective some of their practices in ministry. No doubt their form and substance confusion created great chasms within in their pursuit of integrity. But what grieves me the most is that their form and substance confusion caused them to miss the manifest presence of God in their midst. They couldn't see Jesus. They couldn't see Jesus. Oh, may God help us. May God help us be flexible with the forms. May he help us honor the forms that have served other generations and other cultures well. May he help us hold our own forms rather lightly so that we can pass on to the next generation the freedom to follow Jesus in a new day. And may he help us be stubborn regarding substance. May he help us stubbornly be a people who are committed to worshiping him in spirit and in truth every moment of every day. And may our God help us to stop expending the limited amount of daily emotional energy we have, to stop spending it being offended by things that do not offend him. They were so worried about the dirt in their hands, they missed seeing eternity in his eyes. God, help us see Jesus. This morning, I would like to lead us in a few brief prayers of reflection. And then I have one specific request of a specific group in this house today. And then Pastor Scott will be coming to close us. So as I read these brief prayers, I invite you to rest, to risk asking, is there any way you need me to respond? Write it down. Take it into your devotions, your friendships, your small groups, and let us apply this word in our generation. The first prayer is this: Mighty God, in your mercy, please reveal to us any way in which we devalue others' sincere souls simply because of their form. We wait in your presence. Mighty God, we also ask that you would reveal to us any circumstance in which our hope in service and ministry is in forms instead of in substance. We wait upon you. God, we also ask that you would reveal to us any hypocrisy that we have justified and rationalized in our lives. Any way we have hoped that what people can see would somehow be a substitute for what only you, my God, can see. And God, I ask that you would reveal to us any way in which our focus on form is blinding us to the manifestation of your presence. Oh, we want to see Jesus. We want to see Jesus. And as those prayers settle into our soul, as I mentioned, I have one last request of one specific group. My request is for those of you who are here today and you've pressed the pause button on what you are going to do with God. And there's probably a lot of different and very good reasons. For some, you may just be beginning to explore who God is and what that means to you. For some, you may have been so deeply wounded by people who called themselves Christian that It just took a whole lot of courage for you to walk into this place today. And I think for many in our generation, spin has become such an art form. We begin to think that maybe truth can't be found and maybe truth doesn't even exist. Whatever the reason, I have a request for you. And I make this request on behalf of all sincere followers of Jesus Christ. On behalf of all of us who love Jesus, would you please forgive us? Would you please forgive us for any way in which our focus on form has distracted you from the substance of our faith from Jesus? Would you forgive us for any way in which our form and substance confusion has sown bitterness in your soul? Would you forgive us for the ways in which in our short-sightedness we've wounded you? You see, we're supposed to be like these clear windows, and you're supposed to be able to look through us and see the substance of our faith. You're supposed to be able to look through us and see Jesus, but with our own hands, we muddy that window. And I wish I could say it's going to stop after the amen tonight, but we're still imperfect and we're still in process, and we've got a whole lot more mud on our hands and our feet and in our hearts. But I'm going to ask you, please, consider forgiving us and take another look at him. Oh, would you take another look at Jesus? Because he is pure, and his love for you doesn't ebb and flow. His love for you isn't here today and gone tomorrow. He will never leave you. He will never abandon you. His love for you is everlasting and eternal. This is my request. Would you please forgive us? And would you take another look at him? And I'm going to ask that you would hold that plea in your heart as Pastor Scott comes and concludes us this morning.